So our first question is from a listener named Jackson, and he asks, I've been doing CrossFit for a bit now and I have loved it, but I'm starting to feel some lower back discomfort when I do overhead movements like jerks, handstand push-ups, and other gymnastics like toes to bar. Any tips or anything I'm missing that I should work on to prevent this?
To answer this question, and for a lot of questions that are out there, because the common theme is that why people don't do CrossFit is that they're intimidated or they're afraid. And the reason that they're intimidated or afraid is either they've seen the elite athletes who are doing incredible things, like absolutely incredible things that most people are capable of, but they have to put in a lot of work to get to that point. The other reason they're afraid is that in the early days of CrossFit, there was a bad rap on injuries in CrossFit. And since then, they've done a really good job of educating coaches more and looking more at programming and figuring out how to use progressive overload in a way that keeps their members safe and healthy, because part of CrossFit is being able to be consistent. And if with any workout, if you're not able to be consistent, it's not going to serve you long term. So with injuries in CrossFit, what the research shows right now is that the injury rate in CrossFit is actually less than the injury rate of recreational running, gymnastics, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding. So it's actually less than these other things that are out there. The reason being is that a lot of gyms are doing a really good job of educating their members what movements they are ready for and what movements that they need to build up further for. So when we look at any of these higher level movements like a toes to bar. So if you don't know what toes to bar is, you're hanging on the bar, you're using a kip swing, and then engaging your lats, going back, and then kicking your feet up to the bar so that your toes hit it. That's a toes to bar movement. It's a complex movement. When you get into CrossFit and you get to ring muscle ups and these other things, you're like, oh, toes to bar is basic. No, toes to bar is a difficult movement.
It's so hard
to get. But before you ever go to a toes to bar, can you do a hollow hold? Can you do a Superman? Do you have the joint integrity? Do you have the neuromuscular capacity? Do you have the grip stamina? Do you have the lat engagement? Do you have the things that are needed to execute a toes to bar? If no, we have to go back and work on those things. For example, the other movement you mentioned is a jerk. So bar on your shoulders, you're dipping the hips. When I dip, you dip, we dip, we all dip. You dip, you drive, and you dip under the bar again to catch it, and then stand up with it. And that's a push jerk, a split jerk. You dip, you drive, you catch in a split position, then you walk your feet back in, and you stand up with the bar overhead. So that's our jerk position. Before you jerk, do you have adequate shoulder mobility to get into that position? Do you have integrity that you're not doing this crazy arch back position that all the forces is going down to your lower back? Have you built up the ability to do a push press and then a push jerk and then a split jerk? So with every movement in any domain of fitness, there's always progressions that need to be done in order to make sure that you are ready and that your system is ready to express that bigger movement that you're trying to do. So what ends up happening is people get into a workout that they're in week 2, they still don't really know how to jerk, they don't really know how to toes to bar, but they're gonna go for it because the clock is ticking and the class is fun and it's competitive and they wanna compete against their friends and just show that like they belong. So they start arching their back like crazy, throwing this weight overhead that they have no business throwing up overhead, going to a toes to bar and just dumping their low back, hinging crazy at their back, not using lat engagement. They don't have the right shoulder mobility yet to do it. They haven't built up tolerance to that type of movement. And now they're building volume on top of it. They did too much too soon. That's where the injury comes from. Mm-hmm. Not from the movement itself, but from the load and not being prepped for it. So a long-winded answer to say, if you're experiencing low back pain with these particular movements, we have to go back and ask, well, what's the foundation? How much of a foundation have you built? And CrossFit has done a really good job at better identifying the foundation and implementing it into their classes. And coaches have done a much better job of pulling people aside and going, hey, guess what? You're not ready for a split jerk yet. You will be, but we want you to get there appropriately because we want you to be here long-term. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, this person's split jerking, but they've been working on it for 6 years. You're working on a split jerk and you're new. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a PVC pipe or a training bar. And what you're going to do is work on the form, but we're still going to develop strength by using a dumbbell overhead press or a strict barbell overhead press while you're working on that higher level technique. So I hope that it's not a direct answer. Like a lot of times, like people are getting these injuries, they're just doing too much too soon. They don't have the right form. So their joints are being exposed to ranges and the extremes that they're just not prepped for yet. And same thing with muscles, tendons, the whole neuromuscular system. When we're exposed to things that we're not ready for too long and we're not ready for, that's where these things are going to come up. So the reason I say this is I made these mistakes early on in my CrossFit career. I trained way too hard. I got injuries, and it wasn't anyone's fault except for my own and trying to keep up. And my buddies and I look back now at the way that we used to train together, and we're like, oh my gosh, like that is not how you do this. So we do have to put ego aside. We have to go, I'm in this for the long haul. I want the long-term gains. So I'm going to spend the time to perfect this with a PVC pipe, with a training bar, and then to slowly work up in weight, even though the guy next to me is split jerking 315.
We talk a lot about intention, and if you're Jackson or just listeners in general, if your intention is doing CrossFit for the long haul, then building this foundation is essential. If your intention is to do CrossFit as a trend and you know that you're going to hop to the next, kickboxing or whatever, cycling, I don't know. But like if you're going to hop, then you're most likely going to have these different discomforts because you're going to skip a lot of steps to try and be cool, like the other CrossFitters who are more elite. And I'm really grateful that in my journey with CrossFit, my intention has been the long haul, because Dylan's been with me not since day one, but basically since day two in my literally day two in my CrossFit journey. And he didn't let me do things that were going to create injury. He didn't let me do a kipping pull-up until I could do strict pull-ups. I can't do handstand push-ups yet, strict, and so he's not teaching me how to kip them, where I know many other people who are doing these things and just skipping steps, and I hope that they don't get injured, but the likelihood of them getting injured versus myself is higher because of skipping steps. And so I think just for anyone listening and for Jackson yourself, ask yourself, did I skip steps, and can I go back to correct those steps and go back and build that foundation that you deserve to have so that you can have it for the long haul.
One of my favorite memories of Brandy is that last year was, or what would we say, 2 years ago now? Because not the last Open, but the year before this Open.
Yes.
Was Brandy's first time doing the Open, and the first workout, Brandy was doing a scale that ended with pull-ups. She got to the pull-up bar, and people, they're kipping their pull-ups. Brandy was not in the space. She was still developing her strict pull-ups. She wasn't in the space to be ready for a kipping pull-up yet. She got to the pull-up bar and repped out. How many did you do?
I wish I remembered. 14 or
14.
I think the goal was 16.
Yeah.
And I got 14 or so. I was just a couple short, but
14 strict pull-ups. Oh my gosh, the amount of people that came up to her after that workout and were like, how did you do that? How did you do that amount of pull-ups without kipping? I did 20 kipping pull-ups, but I can't do one strict pull-up. And Brandy goes, well, my coach won't let me do them. And they were kind of a little confused as to that. But the point being is kipping pull-ups are a great tool to use in order to get high volumes of it when you're ready for it. But if your goal is to impress people, like a strict pull-up for that amount of reps, like that was impressive. Like a lot of people and then when Brandy was ready for learning kipping pull-ups, she crushed it. She was ready for it, didn't have injuries because she built up a strict foundation of strength to now be ready for that type of movement.
Yeah.
And again, I want to make the point that goes for any type of exercise. Like if you haven't ran in 10 years and you signed up for a 5K, like please do the things necessary to be successful in that 5K so you don't go do the 5K, injure yourself, and now have a bad taste of movement and exercise and competition and never want to do it again. If you haven't thrown a baseball in 20 years and you go out and you throw 60 pitches off the mound, your shoulder's going to be sore and you're likely going to have an injury. But if you went out and the first time and you threw 15 pitches. And the next time you go out, you throw 30 pitches, and the next time 45, and then the next time 60. You're gonna adapt to that. And it's all about adaptation. We did an event at a CrossFit gym, and that's the point that we really hit home, is that spreadsheets don't lift weights. You can write a program up on the whiteboard. Guess what? That whiteboard did not get any % stronger from the workout being written there. The way that we get stronger is by doing the work, but then adapting to that work. If we push too far into a zone that we're not ready for, and our body's not able to adapt to that stressor, now we're set up for injury. So it's about, yes, we need the stressor, we need the stimulus, but then we need to drive adaptation for recovery.
Mm-hmm. And I hope that people don't hear that and think that that's nope, right? Like everything that we're saying right now is not nope. It's not this like, oh, you should be afraid to go and do these movements. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is take the necessary steps so that you can build the adaptation and so that you can eventually reach those goals. There's a process to everything, but you can do it. The hope is that you can do it. You have the agency to do it. You have the goals. You're setting the framework. Like all of this is possible. All of this is hope. Just make sure you're doing the right steps.
Yeah, and add on to that, what is the trilogy of hope? Self-agency, goals, and then pathways or a framework to achieve that. If your framework is running you into the ground over and over and over again, that is leading you towards nope. So hope, there's an art to it, and there is a science to this. We know how much force the body takes on when it goes for a run. We have an idea about how many single leg contacts happen in a mile, and it happens to be about 750 single leg foot contacts. So if you're coming back from an injury, you're getting ready to run, like we can build up plyometrics and see how many foot contacts can you do. Okay, you tolerated half of that. Okay, well now we have an idea of how far you can actually run before we start pushing too much into that, because if we push too much into it, the tissue's not going to adapt. And if we keep pressing into that, that's where that injury is going to occur. So as Randy said, that's not a message of nope, it's more of a message of hope. And how do we keep hope? Well, we have to use a framework that allows these things to become achievable. And the way that it becomes achievable is that there's levels to this, and there's a process to this, and you just have to have the right framework to get to that.